In this People and Performance podcast episode, Chris Bjorling and I are lucky to get the chance to pick the brains of one of the best known and most respected professionals in the world of human resources anywhere. Our illustrious guest today is Steve Browne, Chief People Officer at LaRosa's Inc., a regional pizzeria restaurant chain in Southwest Ohio. Until recently, Steve was also a member of the Society for Human Resource Management, SHRM, and there he was one of the members of the board of directors. He also facilitates a monthly HR Roundtable in Cincinnati. He manages a weekly internet forum, HRNet, that reaches tens of thousands of HR professionals around the world, and has an internationally recognized HR blog. In addition, he's the author of 2 best-selling books, HR on Purpose and HR Rising. Listen to this discussion that we have with Steve to get his take on a bunch of performance-related topics, including the characteristics of great leaders, how measuring employee performance has changed as a result of shifts caused by the pandemic, and how employers can better communicate change. Chris and I hope that you enjoy this conversation that we had with Steve. Steve Browne, you fabulous, wonderful man. Welcome to the People and Performance podcast today. Chris and I are delighted to have you here.
It's great to be with you both. I love it. We were laughing before we even came on, so it's going to be a good show.
All right, Steve, it's a pleasure to meet you today. And yeah, like you said, our pre-call was kind of fun and exciting. So I'm very interested to hear your answers to the questions we have for you today in the few minutes that we get to spend with you. So here's a great question for you that we thought about and want to put it to you. So the question is, what are the characteristics of a great leader? Someone who can maintain and nurture high-performing and happy teams.
I think there's a few components that fall into it, in my opinion. The first one is, are you authentic and approachable? So if people come into a room, is it a nuisance or something you welcome? I don't think it's based on whether you're extroverted or introverted. I think it's, do people see you as being approachable? And when they do, are they getting the real thing instead of some made up work persona? Those are key. And the other part is, do you focus on others more than yourself? It's bigger than servant leadership to me. I think servant leadership is kind of inherent in great leaders, but being others focused on purpose shows leadership, because if you take care of those around you, they will say, there's the leader. It's funny. We just had this happen in our organization where we get tied up in roles and levels and positions and titles. It's just like any other company. And I said, if you want to know who's leading, who's the first person's name who comes up? And it takes all of that out of it, because they'll say, well, the person who leads is, and it could be situational, but you'll see it, those things are key of how approachable they are, how authentic they are, and are they focused on other people outside of themselves?
Excellent. Yeah. I love how you say that. You know, when we do a lot of our workshops on competency modeling and different things like that, it's always when we're setting up teams to come in, it's like, okay, don't just give me the org chart. You know, give me the people that people turn to
Right.
when it's time to perform and to do that. And so, yeah, I can agree wholeheartedly with you on that stuff. So another question, you know, so we've been living through this thing called the pandemic right now, and it keeps resurfacing itself as we go forward. So the question for you is, how has measuring performance changed as a result of the shifts caused by the pandemic?
It's changed in a few key ways, especially for us. I'm not a traditional measure performance type person. I want people to perform as an expectation. So the key to me is, wherever you are or whatever you're doing, are you equipped and are you working? It will show in your performance. So I think it's more for me setting the expectations and having people have clarity so that they know how to perform. We tend to focus on exceptions. Oh, this is what happened here. Or, gosh, Chris is working at home and Bill's in the office and Steve's on the road. And we get focused on different circumstances instead of what the person offers. So we're trying to switch our mindset to say, how can I allow you and expect you to perform and then watch you do it? It's really worked well, because then it's not bound by geography. It's not bound by workplace. or space. It's more along the lines of, you know what is required of you, and then we make sure you're equipped to do it. And if you're not, we'll fill the gaps in.
Excellent. And you said equipped and enabled in that process too, because I agree with you like there. It's like, set the expectation. This is our expectation. You're going to perform and this is what you're going to do. But I like the equipped and the enabled part. Could you expand on that just a little?
Yeah, I think a lot of times we give people roles and jobs and don't give them context at all. It's here, knock this out. I'll give you a good example. I did a thing where it was, I need to do a new roster of our people. We just switched payroll providers. So I have a great person on my team, Rebecca, and I said, Rebecca, I need a new roster, and this is why. X, Y, Z. And this is how I'm going to use it. So your good work is going to help down the road, but I need you to be the person that pulls that together. I came in this morning, she's halfway done.
Excellent. Excellent. Great, a great solution that you just went through and walked us through there as an example. So thank you. Appreciate that.
So, Steve, you've spoken quite a lot on the people side because you are you are a genuine, authentic person, and that's where you start with your leadership at LaRosa's. But what about on the tech side? Okay, what's happened? What's evolved? What's changed over the last couple of years to help HR leaders better measure their employees?
Tech's a funny thing, Bill. It's hard for practitioners to maneuver what works best for their organization. I would love to see more platforms make the bridge to say, hey, Steve, tell me about LaRosa's and how can we have that fit? And then they say, and this is how our tech applies to this. There are incredible platforms all across the HR universe, engagement platforms, and I'm not going to say specific brands, but even in how you use tech is what's missing on the practitioner side. We're told buy tech because you need tech. Back to what I was talking about with Chris. If the tech equips people to do their job better, I'm in. If the tech is just something fancy that has a lot of bells and whistles and works on someone's phone, don't need it. So I think the piece that's missing is the practical side of this. And a great version of this is the infamous Zoom. I think it's great. Here we're talking from Europe and New York and Cincinnati on a platform that's tech. It's wonderful. But people say, oh gosh, this isn't engaging, and gosh, it's dull and stuff like that. I think again, you're taking the people element out of tech. I would love to see it put it back in, because great people involvement makes tech come to life.
I agree, and I don't think folk really need all those bells and whistles, unless maybe they're a dog trainer or something, right? Okay, so what do you believe that employees value the most from their employer in this new normal? Like, what's the number one thing? And your answer could be a one-word answer potentially.
I think the thing that people want most is to be valued for what they do. And that could be, are you going to care for my well-being? Are you going to give me flexibility? Are you going to allow me to do my job? Are you going to give me the tools I need? Are you going to build the relationships I need to have? Those are hows in the midst of, do I make a difference here? Do I matter? I love that people are being more upfront about this. It's been something that's been underlying in the workforce for decades. It's just now come to light, and the big switch is, if somebody doesn't feel valued, they will go somewhere where they will be valued. So as employers, we need to be very mindful of that.
Change is inevitable as we go through this. And as we've gone through the pandemic, it's inevitable because of all of the restrictions and enablings and non-enablings and everything else like that along the line. So the question I have for you is, what advice do you have for business leaders when it comes to communicating change with the employees?
Get out of crisis mentality. When the pandemic hit, we had never seen anything this as a society or as a generation ever. The last big global thing happened 70 years ago. There are pockets of things that have happened over that time that are crisis oriented. But if you're always in a crisis, you're not really communicating. So that's not change, in my opinion. I think it should be because change is always happening, this is how we're going to move forward. I was talking recently with some people and I said, I don't want to go back because you can't. It's not possible. So my thing is, if this is the landscape we're in, how do we adapt and move forward? So to frame it for your leaders and for your company to say, quit being an alarmist. Let's assess what's going on, breathe, check, and then move forward.
Okay, so you've spoken a little bit about your approach at LaRosa's, Steve. But in more general terms, leaders must obviously determine what desired behaviors will best support their particular company's purpose. How can they determine what those behaviors should be, and how do they reinforce them? Just at a structural level, if we're talking about archetypal company X, what are those processes to make sure that they can seek out and then maintain the behaviors that they want from their employees?
That's a great question. I think it's key that companies move to a bit more behavioral model. And by that, I mean, what behaviors work best here at X company? So, what norms fit us? What ways are we really engaging and elevating and encouraging our people? So, you should have some sort of model, and there are a million out there, but you should say these are the attributes that fit us best. For instance, in our pizzerias, it's a different culture than our office, but our behaviors can be the same regardless of the type of industry we're in. These same behaviors can work in our manufacturing plant, and or if I'm in a service organization or a healthcare organization. I think we have to get past mission and vision. Those are key, those are important, those are directional. You should have a directional foundation. Behaviors are daily. So what behaviors do I want from Bill when he works at my company? Hey, Bill, at this company, we believe in this, and this is how we make it come to life. To do this, you have to have an executive team that's willing to talk about strategy versus implementation. We jump into the weeds instantly. You have to be able to pull back and say, the following behaviors define us. And then when someone doesn't fall into those behaviors, you say, hey, I need to remind you about this behavior.
I love how you set up your culture that way. So as we start to wrap up, we ask everybody, all of our guests, the same question. And so I'm going to pose it to you, and I'll look forward to your response here. From a culture and people processes perspective, what does a high-performing company mean to you?
High-performing company is where people are aligned on purpose, and it's intentional all the time so that people can do their best in whatever role they're in. So your frontline person can do the best as well as the executive. I think if we would build more towards this is how you do well at our company on a regular basis, people would flock to that company. But you have to have alignment. And it's different for different companies and different types and different geographies, different demographics, different workforces. But build on the diversity that's already inherently in your organization and elevate that in the strengths of your people.
Great. I love how you bring the aspect of branding in there. This is how we do it, and this is why we do it. And everything that you've talked about really is people-centric. That's here. So it just makes sense with everything you put out there. So thank you very much, sir. Well, as our time comes to this close here, we have one last question for you specifically. How can we learn more and more about you?
Oh, gosh. The best place to get connected to me is Twitter, because I am very active, at SBrowne, HR, with an E on the end of Browne. You can get with me on LinkedIn, but like I've told Bill when I've had a chance to be on this before, if you connect with me, understand that I'm going to really connect with you, and it's on.
Love it. Love it. Thank you so much for your time today. Bill, any closing thoughts?
Steve does what he says. If he connects with you, he becomes your friend. He helps you out. He supports you because that's the way he acts with his community. And I would imagine that's why LaRosa's employees are very lucky people because he is around. So those are my closing thoughts, I think, other than to say, Steve, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for the opportunity. Great to be with you, Bill and Chris.
This podcast is supported by Fidello Inc., a consulting firm specializing in improving human performance. Through their products and services, Fidello helps clients design, develop, and implement strategic integrated human resource processes and systems. Learn more at fidello.com. That's FIDELLO.com.